Hello everyone, DJ Monkey here. I'm the solo game developer for Tales from the Dancing Moon, and I'm also known for building some tools for building bases in No Man's Sky, both Blender versions and the app version developed in Unreal Engine. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I develop quests for my game, Tales from the Dancing Moon. This is a bit of a response, well, not a response, but I was kind of inspired by a video by Josh Sawyer, who is the sort of design director, head guy of Obsidian Entertainment. He did a video which went through their tool set for doing this sort of thing. So writing quests and how dialogue can kind of branch based on your decisions that you make in the game. I developed a similar tool, or I'm still developing a similar tool, and it was kind of encouraging to see sort of the similarities between my tool and their tool. And so I thought I would kind of just do a similar video of my tool set, my kind of work process for doing this sort of thing, and that's it really. So if you have any questions or if you're interested in any of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, feel free to follow me on Twitter or interact with me in any other way. You can join the Discord as well that I have set up for my stuff. So I'll just jump into it. And I've got this picture opening right here, and this is basically just a sort of very broad overview of how I've structured quests within my game. So starting from the top, we've basically got this quest object. This is sort of like this big container of what belongs in a quest. Beneath that we have quest actions, and these are basically the steps which you need to take in order for a quest to complete. So you can have many quest actions that belong to a quest, and that varies from quest to quest within the game that I developed. And then there's also quest tasks. Quest tasks are sort of optional. This is if I want to have a bit more granularity as to what you'll be doing for that particular quest action. There are sort of key differences between quest actions and quest tasks, even though they are fairly sort of similar. So a quest action is ordered. I've kind of written that here. So it's ordered. So basically you need to perform quest actions in order for a quest to complete. And I've numbered these here. So in this case, I've just got 1, 2, 3. Need to do these in order for the quest to complete. Quest tasks can be completed in any order in order for a quest action to be complete. And I'll give you a little bit of an example. I will show this in the tool as well when I get to it. And I will kind of timestamp the video as well, so you can skip along if you want to. So the typical example, if you have like an MMORPG typical quest, if you have like a farmer who's got a problem with rats attacking his livestock or something, and he wants you to kill 10 rats, the quest action would basically be like, okay, you've spoken to this farmer, he's given you the sort of instruction, and you need to carry out the tasks, and then after you've done the tasks, you'll talk to the farmer again to move on to the next quest action. The quest task in that situation would be to kill 10 rats. So there'll be a counter for like, 10. There'll be like a unique ID for the rat entity in the game. Every time you kill a rat, that's going to increment until it reaches 10. When it's reached 10, that task will be complete, and then you can then talk to the NPC and the quest action before moving on to the next action. So yeah, I hope that kind of made sense. And there can be as many quest actions and as many quest tasks belonging to these objects. But I guess in the scope of the quest, there's only one quest because that's kind of like the top level structure. I've kind of laid these out like this as well because this has parity with the sort of data structures that I have mapped out, both in the tooling that I have for writing this, but also in the Unreal structs that I've developed, that I've sort of created as assets within the game. So yeah, I think that kind of covers how quests are sort of structured, and I'll show the tool now, which is this button right here. And actually what I'll do is I will bring this slightly this way, and then I'll have the picture on the right here so that we have something to sort of compare it with. So I'll do a little bit of an overview of the tool first. It's fairly simple in the way it's laid out. So we have the tab to workflow, so we have quests selected at the moment. There's quest dependencies, and this is basically like a node network that lets me map out the sort of quest flow from like the start of the game towards the end of the game. There's dialog, which is sort of a little bit of a mix of both sort of UI elements. So we have a node canvas for dialog trees, or a node network for dialog, and also a tree on the left to basically select the character that you'll be talking with. Then we have books as well, so this kind of lives sort of separate to the quests, in that I can just add books, and I can basically write the chapters for those books in this big thing here. And I also get a sort of font preview of how that's going to sort of look in the game as well. This section is relatively simple compared to like the quest stuff, which I'll go through in this video. So going back to quests, so the first quest that I've got selected here in the tool is basically the quest that you do at the start of the game. So in this case you have to, I've called it introduce yourself, because you basically have to go through all of the different NPCs in the game and sort of introduce yourself and kind of learn who they are. You kind of have global information about the quest at the top, so you have like the description. And just so you know, I'm kind of referring to this object at the top here, so this is just like the quest. The description is basically when you load up your journal in the game, this will be the sort of text that you see for that particular quest. This is kind of visible like at the start of the quest, so you don't, I try to write these with as little sort of known information as possible. So in this first example, I've just put like, you awake in a strange room, you appear to be in an inn, now that you're awake you should probably head downstairs and investigate. So, very kind of vague, a bit broad in terms of its information. And then I have the completion description, so this is basically what is shown after you've completed the quest. So now you have all this kind of learnt information just from like doing the quest, and if you want to kind of recall what you've done in the journal, then this is basically what will show. So this will be a sort of a summary or a recap of all the actions that you've taken for this quest. I'll go through some of these properties here. I won't go into too much detail because they can be a bit sort of finicky in terms of its configuration, but the category is, this serves no purpose in the game actually, this is more for organizational purposes. So in this case this is tagged as the tutorial category. I can tag it as like Act 1 or Act 2, and that actually determines like where that shows in the tree here. This kind of just gives me a helpful sense of like progression as I kind of fill out these quests. I can check it as a procedural quest. That's kind of a nuance of the gameplay design. So some quests can be repeated, but like have parameters feed into it to kind of like change things. That's kind of what procedural means. Requirements. So if I click on this and I just add a condition, you can kind of get a sense as to what this means. So requirements basically mean that in order for you to start this quest, you, the player, has to fulfill these conditions for that to happen, or else that quest won't be available to you. The typical example here is that if you have a quest later on in the game, you might want that quest to only be available after you've completed like a certain other quest. And so I can set the sort of condition to be something like completed quest, and I just put in the ID for the quest that needs to be completed in order for this quest to begin. That's just one example, but you can see that there's a whole bunch of other conditions that I can play with in this list here. All of these things have their own kind of blueprint or gameplay logic that Unreal Engine basically handles. I'll just remove that and I'll close. Start resolvers, this is a similar thing where basically the game has to perform these actions when you start the quest. So for example, it might be that the game has to give you a certain item before you start doing the quest actions, and I can kind of set that here. Or if the NPC has given you some money to buy something, I could just kind of add some money here as well that the player can receive. So that's kind of simple, really. And then I have the dialogue. I'll go into that a little bit later. So that covers like the sort of general quest details. Let's just go into the quest actions now. So actually, this probably isn't the best example because all of these quest actions basically require the player to basically talk to the next person. So nothing too exciting happening there. So let's choose another one. Let's choose the Live Off the Fowl of the Land quest. This is a farming quest essentially. This basically teaches the player how to use the farming tools. So similar setup, you've got all the description stuff here. If I click on the first action, so in this action, the NPC that you speak to basically has just told you that the mayor had all these notes, but wasn't very good at keeping them organized. So she's realized that they're actually kind of like spread out all throughout the town. So your job is to basically go on like a sort of treasure hunt for all these notes that the mayor has left, which details how you, or details plans as to how you can like farm basically in the game. That's kind of like an oversimplification of the quest, but like that's essentially what's happening here. So if I just map this to like the picture that I have here, so this is the quest at the top here, and then we have a quest action called taking notes, and then we have tasks, so these green guys here that I put here. So basically these tasks will be complete if I find the item called Mayor Note 1 and I have it in my inventory. And that's the same for Mayor Note 2, Mayor Note 3. These all refer to different notes that I've written in the game. They all need to be in my inventory in order for this action to be complete. Once this action is complete, then I basically need to talk to this NPC called Galea. And if I click on the dialogue here, then you get a sense of like what the dialogue will be after I completed that quest action. Again, I'll go into dialogue a little bit later. There are some additional flags here, so basically I can set, if no dialogue is required for this action, I can just click on this button here, which means it will auto-complete after the tasks. I can tick buttons to basically exclude things from the demo or exclude from the full game. So there are some slight differences between what I've included in the demo versus the full game. So those options allow me to kind of do that. Let's just go through and find another example of like tasks. So a lot of these are inventory tasks, so you need to require something to be in your inventory. So this is a different one. So the last task is to basically deposit your produce, so in this case it's carrots, into the market deposit box, and that's how you basically generate money in the game. So in this case, instead of inventory, I've actually tagged this as market deposit. So this is the action of the player placing items in that box. So I basically need to place 20 carrots in that box in order for this task to be complete. Again, I can't remember if I mentioned, like this sort of logic for checking things is all handled by blueprint logic that I set up in Unreal Engine. So all this really is just kind of descriptive metadata really that I'm describing here. And then again, there's dialogue to basically represent like the final act of the game, and that's of the quest, sorry, and that's when the quest will complete. And that's essentially it. So each quest action has like the sort of the name as well and the description. So these will basically be displayed in the top right of the screen on the HUD. And if you choose to basically track those quests. What else? I think that might be it in terms of like quest flow. There's options to basically add and remove things as well, as you'd expect. So if I wanted to add another action, I can just click this button here. It will add it to the end of the list, and I can kind of make the quest longer or shorter if I need be. I can right click and remove that. Actually one more thing I think is, if you've wondered why these are green and these are orange and these are sort of grey, this basically represents the status of their completion in terms of the work that I need to do. So anything that's green is basically like a quest that I've complete, like I don't need to do anything more to it in order for that quest to be in the game. Any quests that are grey are basically ones that I haven't started yet, they're sort of being planned. Any quest that is orange is basically quests that I'm currently working on. So this is really good for like project management basically. So every time I load this tool and I see an orange quest, that means that I have to do work, or at least that's like the thing that I'm currently working on. And let's say I've completed the work for this quest, there's the options up here to basically flag that as done, and then if I click that as done, then that goes to green. So my goal as a game developer is to basically make all of these quests green, and then the game will be done, essentially. So let's put that back down to in progress. There's another field up here which is basically the version of the game. So for example, the tutorials are all set to demo. Some of them are set to beta as well. But this is basically like what quests are included in each experience of the game. So when you play the demo, you only really have access to like these quests up here. But if you have the full game, then you have all this stuff to do down here as well. So let's move on to the next tab quickly. I call this quest dependencies, and basically this is a node network of the quest flow in the game. You can kind of see that there's almost like 3 chunks here, and that's because they're sort of split into their what I call acts in the game. So this first chunk here basically represents the tutorial and act 1 of the game. This chunk is basically act 2, and then this chunk is act 3. There are a bunch of quests down here which kind of represent those in-progress quests, or quests that are a bit more global to the game that don't really fit within this structure. So yeah, there's more that's represented here than within this kind of flowchart. The very first node here is the quest that represents the introduce yourself quest, as you'd expect, because that's the first quest you'll be doing, but then that kind of branches out into all these other quests until you get to sort of the end where you sort of complete the game. Let's move on to dialogue. So I'll try and describe this in a simple way because I think some of these dialogues can be a bit complicated. So let's focus on Fergus, because he's basically the first NPC that you'll be interacting with. This one's a pretty good dialogue to go through actually. So on the leftmost of the network, you basically have the starting point. So when you talk to an NPC, it's basically this node that will be triggering. When I select one of these nodes, I basically have these fields on the right here, and I can basically have text that shows what the NPC is saying, and then I have reply options below that, so that's basically what the player is saying. So in this case, I'm just saying that I found some journals written by this character. Does the NPC know anything about this? That will come up as an option in the sort of conversation window, and then that will traverse down the node network where the NPC will respond with this text over here. And then basically that just kind of repeats itself until you end up at the end of the node network. So in this case, I have added 2 options, like 2 reply options. In this case, it's basically like the difference between like, give me the answer quickly or give me the answer with a little bit more detail. And that's why this basically what is this branching kind of structure represents, because if I choose the first option as the player, it's just going to sort of skip this node and go to this node where I'll be given some information. Or if I choose the second option, it's going to go down this pathway, activate this node, and then I have another option which basically like brings me back onto like the sort of main flow of the diagram, of the node, of the conversation flow. The other thing to sort of show at the end is basically an action node. So this is basically a node that lives at the end of the graph usually, and this basically has triggers on it to make the game perform a certain action. In most cases, the end node will basically have like an end dialog tag, and that basically just means like, okay, I want to stop talking to this NPC now and just get playing the game again. But as you can see, as I just clicked on here, there's a whole bunch of like tags that you can assign. So for example, tick task basically would allow me to check one of the tasks that I've already described in the quest workflow. There's a text field here which basically allows me to provide like the unique identifier for those certain things. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of other things here, like, you know, progress quest as well. That would allow me to progress the quest action that I'm on to move on to the next action. That sort of thing. So this dialogue tab actually represents the general dialogue that you find in the game that's not necessarily related to quests. A good example of that actually is this one that I've tagged as shop entry. So all this dialogue does is basically ask the NPC if they have anything for sale, and that basically triggers the tags to start shopping for that particular NPC. So then it will close the dialogue and bring up the shopping menu where the player can like buy stuff. So there's little kind of node networks like this in terms of dialogue, where they kind of act as a gateway to make the game do something else basically. Another one is for fishing. So basically this is a similar network where basically you're asking an NPC to use one of their boats to go fishing, and then the tag here is basically like boat fishing, because I'm about to go fishing, and then the next moment you'll be in a boat and you'll be sailing around, that sort of thing. So yeah, as I just said, this is all like generic dialogue, but if I go to quests, I kind of hinted earlier that there was kind of dialogue entry points to the quests as well. And this is actually mostly where I do the dialogue writing. So if I have this introduce yourself quest, each quest action basically has this dialogue entry point. If I click on the edit button, this brings up the node canvas for the dialogue that I'll be sort of saying at that given point in the quest. So, you know, this is the first bit of dialogue that you'll be doing in the game. You're basically saying like, you know, what happened, where am I? And then Fergus basically does this whole spiel of like, you know, familiarizing yourself with what's happened. And then there's basically options here to basically flow through that bit of dialogue. And if I just go through like the sort of next actions here, this is a good example actually, because this introduce yourself basically makes you talk to everyone in the village. So each dialogue entry point has like the things for that particular NPC where you'll be flowing through the dialogue. So there's more dialogue that I have to edit for these quests really than there is at the moment in this sort of structure here, where this is more just for things like, oh, I want to go shopping, or I want to do this. Cool, and I think that's kind of it. The last section is books. I can't remember if I described this. I think this is just a sort of, you know, chapter editing tool where I can basically type stuff in and I get a preview on the right here. So yeah, that's it really. As I said, feel free to ask any questions, or if you want to sort of follow me on Twitter and interact with me that way, I'll be happy to answer anything you've got. Thanks.